If you're constantly feeling behind in life, like you're nowhere near where you want to be or should be, and like everyone else has life figured out but you, I want you to know two things. Number one, you are not alone, and number two, it is not your fault. Every day we're flooded through social media with this damaging narrative that we need to achieve everything by a certain age and that if we haven't, that somehow makes us a failure. I've personally struggled with this feeling a lot this year. So I'm 28 now, and when you're approaching the big 3-0, that is supposedly when everything in your life is supposed to come together. By society standards, I should have already progressed enough in my well-paying corporate job. I should have achieved that manager title and finally be earning decent money. By now, I should already have a boyfriend that I've been with for the past few years, and he's gonna propose any day now. And I should be setting down roots somewhere because once we get married, then we're gonna need to know where we're gonna live and buy the house and raise the kids. But in this past year alone, I have completely turned that narrative upside down for myself. Instead, I am jobless. I quit my corporate job last year to pursue a life on my own terms and build my own business. I left my last relationship and moved to a whole new country for a year, and after this, I don't know where exactly I'm gonna be, so I'm essentially rootless. And so I really wanted to make this video because I wanted to share some realizations and really important lessons that I've learned about feeling behind. These reminders have been a lifeline for me whenever I start to spiral or when I start to feel like a failure for not following the timeline that society apparently has mapped out for us. With extra emphasis on love and career, because I know that these are two very key areas of life that people tend to feel the most pain about. Before we get into it, if you're new here, hi, my name is Tika, and I quit my corporate job last year to pursue a life on my own terms. On this channel, I share everything to do with self-improvement to help you live your healthiest, wealthiest, and most fulfilling life. So if that sounds like your jam, then do subscribe. The first thing I realized is that it's hard being behind on the conventional timeline, but it's a lot harder living a life that is not true to you. By society standards, I've regressed a lot in life. So I used to work a fancy corporate job in banking back home in Malaysia, where I'm from. And I quit that life because I wanted to start my own business. I wanted to take content seriously, and I wanted to pursue a path on my own terms. After I quit, I moved to Australia under a work and holiday visa, which allows me to live here for 12 months and also gives me the option to work here part-time if I want to. And when I first moved to Australia, I started working as a gym receptionist just to earn living expenses whilst I was building the business and whilst I was trying to stabilize myself financially. Relationship-wise, I was with someone back in 2023, and we were at that point where we were about to settle down together, but because I was unhappy, I left that relationship and I ended up moving here all by myself. So yeah, going from my fancy corporate job where I was earning a higher than average salary compared to my peers to becoming a gym receptionist and earning minimum wage, and also going from being in a relationship with someone and about to settle down with them to becoming single again. I essentially just started from zero. But this is something that I found really interesting. Back then, when I had my fancy corporate job and when I was in a relationship and I was essentially on time according to society standards, that was when I felt the saddest. And it made me realize that maybe living this way in a way that is palatable to other people and makes sense according to society's timeline is not the right way to go about living a happy and fulfilling life. At least for me. When you think about it, how many people stay in jobs that they hate? And how many people settle with the person that they're with even though they're not exactly happy just because they don't want to be alone, or their biological clock is ticking, or they're already 30 and they really don't have time to waste and should be settling down with someone? I would say a lot of people, if not most people. Most people feel it deep down in their hearts, but they're too scared to even admit it to themselves. It doesn't matter how fast you're going if you're going in the wrong direction anyway. For me, I was progressing well in my corporate career, but at the same time, I also felt like I was going nowhere fast. I was speeding and running in this one direction, but where was I ultimately running to? What was I working towards? The answer to that question hit me one day when I was in the office and I sort of just looked around me at all my seniors who were 10 to 20 years ahead of me. And I saw how jaded and how lifeless they were from decades of working a job that just paid the bills. I saw how miserable they were, and I saw how they were always just waiting for something, waiting for 5 p.m., waiting for the weekend, waiting for those precious 3 weeks of holiday where they can finally escape their life. And to them, things may not be so terrible. It pays the bills. My job isn't the biggest asshole, but he's not great either. And my life is just, it's okay. But to me, the thought of living just an okay life was so terrifying to me. I want to live a life that I don't feel the need to escape from, and this is why I'm so passionate about intentional life design and why my whole channel is about living your healthiest, wealthiest, and most fulfilling life. Back then, I felt like I was living in the shadows of my real life, like I was in a simulation that someone else was controlling. As put together and as structured as my life seemed on the outside, inside it was a mess. I was crumbling, and I had never felt so lost in my life. And because of that, I really struggled to get out of bed every morning. I was completely depleted of energy. I was going through life like a zombie, and I just couldn't stand another day living that way. And now that I'm pursuing my own path and building my own business and paving my own way, I have never felt more alive than I do now. Like, yes, this is finally me living my real life. I've never felt more fulfilled, and deep down, I know that I'm living a life true to me. And when you do that, you show up in life differently. I feel like I walk with my back a little straighter, with my head held up higher, and I have all this confidence and boundless energy about me. What I've realized from all this is that sometimes you just need to take a step back in order to progress forwards. It's okay if you need to take a pay cut to work part-time, or to move in with your parents for a little while, or to downgrade your life, because it's not forever. It's just for this season of life. And taking that small step backwards is the price that you have to pay in order to redirect your life to the one that you actually want to live. And in my opinion, that is a small price to pay in comparison to the alternative. Because the alternative is living a life that you do not love, living a life that you feel the need to escape from. And that, in my opinion, costs way more. There's this Japanese saying that I really love. If you get on the wrong train, get off at the nearest station. The longer it takes you to get off, the more expensive the return trip will be. The next thing I wanted to focus on is feeling behind in love and relationships, because I know this gets a lot of people. Your late 20s are typically seen as a time when you should be settling down with the person you're with, and where you should really be committing to that one person that you're gonna be with for the rest of your life. It's funny because all throughout my early 20s, I was always that one friend who was in long-term relationships, and all my friends were single for years, whereas now the roles have reversed, and most of my friends, if not all of them, are either in long-term relationships or have already moved in with their partners or are already engaged. And now I'm the friend who is in her solo era and learning to be content on my own after a decade of being in back-to-back relationships. When I think about it in that way, and I start to see the contrast between where I'm at and where my friends are at, that's when the FOMO really starts to creep in. And I start thinking to myself, am I doing this wrong? But if there is one thing that I have learned in life, is that FOMO is never a good reason to do anything, especially not base big life decisions on like choosing a life partner. Looking back on my life, every time I did something out of FOMO, I always regretted it. Like going to parties and events that I really didn't want to, and when I really just much prefer to stay at home. Staying in relationships that were really not good for me because I was scared to be alone. Also staying in a job that I really hated because that was what everyone else around me was doing. With relationships especially, it's so important to not rush into it, because it's one of those things that has a multiplier effect. When things are good, it makes everything else so much better. You get good support, which means you are more emotionally resilient, which means you can overcome difficult challenges in life better. You have someone to lean on, someone to put you in a better mood, which makes you more productive, and you get the picture. When you have a supportive partner, it just 10x's your life. But when things are bad, it makes life so much harder, and it starts to bleed into other areas of your life. So for example, if you are always staying up late arguing with this person, then you're not getting good sleep, you're not going to be productive the next day, and it's gonna affect your work performance and affect your other relationships. You start isolating yourself from family and other friends because you're constantly needing to put out fires with this one person, and you're constantly having to nurse the relationship back to health. I just wanted to round off this point by saying that yes, it's really hard not having a partner and feeling lonely and not having someone that you can just turn to anytime for that emotional support. But It's so much harder being with the wrong person who makes you feel lonely and awful when you're with them. The last thing I wanted to talk about, which has really helped me with feeling behind, is this idea of playing infinite games. In life, you have finite games and you have infinite games. Finite games are games that you play to win. There is a clear objective, and once you achieve that objective, that's it. You've won and the game is done. But most games worth playing in life are infinite, meaning that the whole point of the game is to keep the game going. You don't want to just get married. You want to stay married. You don't want to just get fit. You want to stay fit. And you don't want to just get rich and then lose all that money. Ideally, you want to keep that wealth for the rest of your life. Most people treat their life like a series of finite games, like this giant box ticking exercise that you just have to get through as fast as possible. And to be honest, like I did too for the longest time. For example, most people tend to fixate on the getting married part. The goal of this finite game is to get that big wedding, to get that expensive ring, and to be able to tick off that box to say that you got married before 30. And once you achieve that goal, then that's it. You've won the game of love. What the infinite game version of this looks like is taking your time to find the right partner, because you only need to find them once and then you can stay with them and have a happy relationship with them for the rest of your life. So I had this really awesome conversation with this Grab driver back home in Malaysia. And by the way, Grab is kind of like the Asian version of Uber. And what he said to me was, you know, getting married is easy. Anyone can get married anytime, but for some reason people celebrate it so much, like it's this big achievement. But what's more impressive, the actual achievement here, is staying married. But no one celebrates that. When you think of life in terms of infinite games, you stop treating it like this box-ticking exercise that you just have to get through as fast as possible. You understand that all the best things in life take time. The best relationships take time and effort to build. The best businesses outlive their founders for generations after. Elite athletes become world-class because they train their whole lives for this one sport. In this past year especially, I've been thinking a lot about what my infinite games are in life. You know, a lot of the time I feel like I'm behind in my career and in my love life and in terms of my fitness journey. But then I think to myself, if I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life, then why am I rushing? If I'm serious about finding my forever person, then surely I should take the time to get to know people properly and see whether we're the right fit for each other, and take the time into becoming the kind of person that my ideal partner would be attracted to, and really working hard on myself. I often lament about the fact that growing my business and achieving financial freedom is gonna take me years. But when I remind myself that I'm doing this for the long haul and that I'm gonna be doing this for the rest of my life, it really takes the pressure off, and your dreams don't have a deadline unless you put one on it. With fitness, I often mentally berate myself for not being at the stage where I want to be. Like, why the hell can I not do a handstand push-up already? Why did it take me 6 months to get my first pull-up? Then when I remind myself like, hey, if I'm gonna be doing this fitness thing for the rest of my life, then what does it matter? What does it matter if I get my handstand push-up in 1 year or in 10 years? Literally nobody cares. So why should you? The final point I wanted to mention here is that when you treat your life like a series of infinite games and you realize that you're gonna keep doing the thing for the rest of your life, then you stop fixating so much on the end goal and you start enjoying the process and the journey of getting there. You focus on the becoming and not the being, and that makes for a more fulfilling life. Thank you guys so much for watching. Today's topic was a bit more of a personal one, and I was pretty excited to film this, and I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What do you guys personally feel behind on in life, and what has helped you? What are your infinite games, if any? Do let me know in the comments below, and as always, take care and see you in the next video.